In the history of the development of modern LEDs and monitors, two things remained a conundrum: the portrayal of blue and the portrayal of black. And while we have pretty much technologically mastered the portrayal of blue, black remains difficult. In fact, with modern LED monitors, the portrayal of black is almost impossible. Only one technology does it well: OLED monitors, but they are fraught with their own problems. While they can portray beautiful, brilliant color, they quickly lose color fidelity. And in fact, modern OLED monitors have to have internal software and hardware that frequently reassesses their color fidelity and makes internal adjustments, and even then it's not perfect. And that's because OLED monitors also fairly quickly wear out over time. Within months, with ordinary usage, OLED monitors begin to lose fidelity. And within a couple of years, many users report that the fidelity has become so poor that while the hardware makes adjustments, it just can't quite get it right anymore. And OLED monitors are very subject to a phenomenon called burn-in, a phenomenon wherein if the same image is portrayed frequently, that image will become sort of permanently etched into the background of the monitor. There is sort of a shadow or a ghost always visible within the image. This makes it unadvisable to use OLED monitors for anything but some kinds of gaming and watching videos. But OLED monitors do have a tremendous advantage in how well they portray blacks. In fact, with their infinite contrast, they are capable of portraying blacks almost perfectly. And in the realm of astrophotography, the ability to portray black is one of the most important things a monitor can do, because this is what allows us to portray the darkness of space cleanly and accurately. And in the realm of astrophotography, very often, we are imaging a great deal of space. Yet, the importance of the ability to portray black is often overlooked in videos and educational materials about shooting astrophotography. And this has led to a number of problems, such as the myth that space is not black. Black is simply the absence of light. And in those places in the cosmos where there is nothing emitting or reflecting light, there is an absence of light. That's black. In fact, in the far depths of space, one could hardly find truer nor deeper blacks. Now, only a couple weeks ago, I did a video on the importance of monitors in astrophotography. In a very real sense, you can think of a monitor as the final part of the image train. Now, if you're struggling with that concept, think about it this way. From the beginning to the end of the astrophotography process, we are working with the electromagnetic spectrum. Light from the objects that we are imaging travels to us as energy in the form of photons and waves. Or rather, the waves collapse into photons when they are measured, but that's another issue, and for another video perhaps. The waves reach our telescopes where they are gathered and focused by mirrors and glass, and they are transmitted through an image train, possibly through filters, and ultimately to a camera sensor where the photons are translated to electrical energy. The values of this energy are recorded and saved in the form of computer memory. And then, at the very end of this whole process, we view these recorded values on our computer monitors, meaning that the computer monitor you use is very literally the end of the image train. But this reality is often forgotten, and many astrophotographers spend many thousands of dollars on premier telescopes and mounts, cameras and filters, and then look at their images on subpar monitors. It's kind of like buying a world-class gaming computer made in 2025 featuring the latest 9070 video cards and fastest processors and playing those games on some old 480p resolution flat screen made 25 years ago. Though I don't think anybody's trying to do that. I think persons just aren't aware of the importance of the monitor in the viewing process of your images. No matter how good your optics, no matter how good your cameras, no matter how good your computer, no matter how good your developing skill, if your monitor is not up to the task, if it's not capable of portraying astrophotography well, all that previous effort goes to waste. And when I made that video a couple weeks ago, that's the idea that I was trying to convey. The monitor we use to view and develop astrophotography is extremely important as any other part of the process. Now, at the time of that video, I covered the virtues, the pros and cons of IPS monitors, VA monitors, and OLED monitors, and concluded that VA monitors were currently probably the best compromise for astrophotography. They provided very good colors and color fidelity, and pretty good blacks, not as good as OLED. I mean, nothing's really as good as OLED, but they also did not have the burn-in and color infidelity over time issues that OLED monitors do. And in fact, I've used a VA monitor for the last 5 years for developing astrophotography and other areas of photography and videography that I work in. However, just 2 days after releasing that video, I came across a technology that honestly I had not considered, mini LED technology, which seems to have been primarily developed for the gaming community, and I'm not much of a gamer. Any given year, I might buy a game and mess around with it for a little bit and you move on. Lately, I've been having a blast with Baldur's Gate 3 in my spare time, but I don't have much spare time. I'm just not much of a gamer, and typically what little time I have available is going to go to something else. So I hadn't really followed the development of this technology, but I just saw this random ad pop up for the Samsung G8 mini LED monitor, and I began to read the specs. And the specs were pretty incredible. 4K resolution, 480 Hz refresh rate, mini LED lighting system making for 1196 dimming zones, 95% display P3 color space, and extremely impressively, 1,000,000:1 contrast ratio. Now, Samsung has a reputation for overselling their hardware a little bit, so I read the review on Artings, and the Artings review does say that Samsung oversold it a little bit, but it by and large delivers what it promises. So I figured, what the heck, if I don't like it, I can return it. So I went ahead and bought it, brought it home, hooked it up, and about 5 seconds later knew I was never going back. Now, I've said before that I don't do product reviews. I'm not trying to sell you on this specific monitor. I want to share with you the advantages of this type of monitor for doing photography. I don't care if you get Samsung's version or some other maker's version, but this type of monitor uses a new technology called mini LED technology, which sets up almost 1,200 discrete dimming points beneath a high-quality VA panel, allowing for the portrayal of nearly perfect black within an image. And that allows this monitor to give a nearly OLED quality of black level. The black of this monitor truly is almost perfect. It's almost OLED quality. Now let's talk about the image that I've had on the screen for the last few minutes, because it actually portrays something incredible. What you're seeing on the left is the BenQ 3270U monitor, a VA panel monitor that I've been using for developing all forms of photography and videography for the last 5 years, because like most VA panel monitors, it gives very good blacks. And the Samsung G8 Odyssey, the mini LED monitor, is on the right. And both monitors have been set to portray their blackest screen. The BenQ VA monitor on the left is showing you its blackest possible screen. And the Samsung G8 Odyssey mini LED on the right is showing you its blackest possible screen. It doesn't even look like it's turned on, does it? The black of this monitor is incredible, and to be frank, I did not believe the reports until I saw it. It is incredible. By the way, I have the curtains closed and the lights turned off so that if there was any light leakage at all coming out of the monitor, it would show. It's just not there. The black that the Samsung G8 Mini can portray is incredible. Now, I'm a big believer that results speak for themselves, so let's continue down this road and compare and contrast the portrayal of astrophotography images on these two monitors. I tried to think of a way to do this that would be fair and accurate, because you see, it's almost impossible to portray two monitors right beside each other, because in addition to each monitor's strengths and limitations, I also have to work through the limitations imposed by YouTube's own video compression and color and dynamic range constriction. And then on top of that, your own monitor's strengths and weaknesses, and I have no way to predict what that will be. I finally decided that perhaps the fairest way to do this was to use a camera just to capture images portrayed by both monitors. So I'm going to use my Fuji X-T3 using an 18mm to 135mm zoom lens. This is a slightly older but reliable and extremely good camera that I've used for professional work for quite a few years now. I'm very fond of it, and it does an excellent job, so I think it'll give us a pretty fair and true representation of the capabilities of both of these monitors. In all the preceding examples, the BenQ monitor will be portrayed on the left, and the Samsung G8 Odyssey Neo mini LED monitor will be portrayed on the right. To maintain fairness in the comparison, I'm going to expose each image at the same place at its brightest point to minimize the possibility that any parts of the image will be overexposed. But I did have to change the exposure times for each images because the Samsung monitor is capable of much greater brightness than the BenQ monitor. It has a vastly higher dynamic range, so the difference between its blacks and brightest areas can be extreme. So I figured the fairest way to portray the image quality of both monitors, while trying to keep the comparison apples to apples in so much as possible, was just to change the exposure time. The camera was sitting on a tripod, so exposure time didn't really matter anyway. I guess the very last thing I'll add just before we start is, bear in mind the images you're about to see actually look much better than what you're going to see portrayed. I wasn't aiming to make the exposures look good when I captured them. I wanted to emphasize the differences between the two monitors. And if you've ever taken a picture of a monitor, you know that it rarely ever looks good. Actually, looking at the monitor looks much better because monitors are designed for the human eye to perceive, not other cameras to perceive, and cameras do not work at all like the human eye. But if you'd like to view the actual images at full resolution to get a sense of the potential for these images, just pop over to the Sky Story Astro bin. The link is provided below in the description of this video. Alright, let's jump into this. This is an image of IC1396. It's my most recent image. On the left, you see it portrayed through the BenQ 3270U, a VA monitor that offers pretty good blacks. And on the right, you see it portrayed through the Samsung Mini LED monitor with its 1,000,000:1 contrast. And while taking pictures of the monitors, it does brutal things to the image, doesn't it? It washes out the colors and manages to lose a great deal of the natural beauty of these images. One of the things that we see really standing out between these two images is the blacks, both in the dark dust of the Elephant's Trunk Nebula and in the surrounding space, are much purer and cleaner in the monitor on the right, the Samsung Mini LED monitor. The detail is also sharper and crisper. You can see this looking through the entire nebula, but if you look in the faint wing that extends from the left of the body-like structure of the elephant's trunk, I'll just circle it to make sure we're all looking at the same thing. You can see the faint detail of the wing shows up much better in the Mini LED monitor, and that's because the Mini LED has a tremendously improved ability to portray dynamic range. And the crispness, the sharpness, and the color detail that runs along the outer left edge of the elephant's trunk and up around the curve over the curl is also portrayed much more clearly in the Mini LED monitor. And this crispness of detail and the more refined color is in large part a result of the greatly improved contrast ratio. And I mean, it is greatly improved. The BenQ 3270U is a great monitor for its price range in particular, with a contrast ratio of about 3,000:1, but it just doesn't even compare to the Samsung Mini LED's 1,000,000:1 contrast ratio. If we zoom in and take a look at the detail at the upper part of the trunk, we get an even clearer perspective of the sharper color and detail in the Mini LED monitor. It has purer and cleaner surrounding space. And the detail in the void or cavern right in the center of the trunk is also sharper and crisper, with the fine detail of the structures within more defined. This next image portrays a vast thicket of stars in dark nebulosity in the region around LDN 673. I shot this image just a couple months ago. And the same as with the previous image, we can see that the darkness is portrayed much more richly and deeply in the Samsung Mini LED monitor on the right. Not only that, but the increased dynamic range allows for the sharper portrayal of the high-frequency information within the image, the fine detail. And it also makes it possible to portray the color within this beautiful region better. The color, which in the BenQ monitor looks to be a sort of pallid pinkish, comes across as a sort of burnished gold or orangish gold in the Mini LED monitor on the right. I have to admit that when I first looked at this image on the Mini LED monitor, I was astounded at the difference. It's not a matter of color calibration either. Both monitors have been calibrated in the same way. It's just the Mini LED monitor, with its incredible ability to portray a high dynamic range, and likewise convey deep and rich color. It just seems to be able to give this image that certain oomph that it needed, the push in the color, as well as convey to it the deep and rich blacks that the dark nebulae needed to really portray them well. Ultimately, the qualitative difference between the ordinary VA monitor on the left and the Mini LED monitor on the right really speaks for itself in this image. This is another recent image of the inner portion of the North American Nebula, a region I call the chasm. The differences in this image are fairly self-explanatory. As is expected, the Mini LED monitor on the right portrays darker, cleaner space. Now, in the photograph, the Mini LED monitor does not appear to portray as much detail in the darker, cleaner space, but the detail shows up clearly to the human eye looking at it directly at the monitor. The loss of detail in the darker space in the Mini LED monitor in the photograph is a result of using a camera to take a picture of a monitor. It just never works out. But to the human eye, that detail is clearly there, and it looks much more attractive more natural than it does in the much lower contrast capability of the BenQ monitor on the left. In the monitor on the left, that detail gives the image a kind of flat appearance. It just doesn't have the same depth, the same realism that one captures due to the much higher dynamic range of the mini LED monitor. And note the difference in the appearance of the space lower center and lower left of the image. We have more defined, detailed shadow and pure darkness of space in the mini LED monitor on the right. And as has been portrayed throughout all the images, the mini LED monitor portrays both color and detail more crisply. And that has a lot to do with the vastly higher dynamic range. I think we'll take a look at just one more image, which I think really conveys the power of mini LED to portray the space just so well, almost to OLED quality. This is a cluster of galaxies in the region around NGC 4784, galaxies that are hundreds of millions to billions of light years away. And there are hundreds portrayed in this single image. And on the left, you're seeing this image portrayed through the BenQ VA monitor, and on the right, you're seeing it portrayed through the Samsung Mini LED monitor. And here, unless YouTube compression crushes the space and makes the appearance of the image on the right awful, you can really see the beauty of clear, black space and its importance in balancing an image. The space here is gorgeous. In the image from the Mini LED monitor, the bright light of the galaxies is highly localized, so that the space around them can be portrayed as dark, pure, clean, and devoid of noise. This gives us a crisp, eye-catching view of the galaxies themselves, helping the galaxies to really stand out against the black void of the cosmos, and stand out more beautifully, like diamonds laid out upon black velvet. And this monitor also allows us to avoid the creation of that common misconception that space is not black. Notice in the BenQ's portrayal of the space how bright it is. In fact, in the standard VA monitor on the left, you can even see a bit of brightness zoning. This happens because the BenQ monitor, like most monitors, uses a few large LEDs to illuminate its panel. The BenQ monitor uses at most a few dozen LEDs, but how many is unknown because it's not listed in the specs. Whereas the Samsung G8 uses almost 1200 mini LEDs to illuminate its panel, allowing for very precise and localized illumination. And likewise, very precise and localized dimming of the surrounding regions, beautifully defining areas of darkness and making for black space. This leads me to conclude that mini LED technology might make for the perfect monitors right now for astrophotographers. There's new technology coming, though it could be 10 years or more down the line. It's possible that the OLED monitor will be perfected and it won't have the color infidelity issues that it does down the line, and especially the burn-in issues. And there is another technology in the pipeline now called micro LED, which has all the virtues of OLED technology, without the color infidelity concerns and without the burn-in. But right now it's prohibitively expensive. The last time I looked at micro LED monitors, they were in the range of $10,000 to $20,000, and that's just too expensive for most people, including me. But if you want to get a monitor that gives you better space than an IPS or a VA monitor can handle, but you don't want to risk the issues with burn-in and color infidelity, it would seem that a mini LED monitor is the way to go. You know, I was intending to replace my monitor sometime this year or next year, and I really was honestly giving a lot of thought to OLED, even despite the problems that it had. Because I wanted the ability to portray true and beautiful space so much. It is just so important to good astrophotography. So I thought, well, okay, I'll just get an OLED monitor and make it a secondary monitor and just use it for viewing and editing images. But then I knew the problem would be that every time I would turn the thing on, there would be a clock ticking in my head and I would wonder how long I had run it. I'd be worried whether or not I had that one image sitting on there just too long. And I'd be thinking about the loss of color fidelity over time and all the other problems associated with OLEDs. So I thought, what's the point of getting that kind of technology if the goal is to use it as little as possible? So when I came across some articles on the potential for mini LED technology, I was quite enthused. And when I saw the Samsung G8 Odyssey mini LED monitor pop up on sale, I thought, I am definitely going to give that a try. Now this particular monitor is made for gamers, but I'll tell you a secret. When buying computer hardware, whether monitors, computers, or video cards, for astrophotography or really any kind of photography or videography editing, you can save yourself some money and get top-of-the-line equipment by getting stuff gamers are using. Gamers demand good hardware, it's graphics-oriented, and it works well for photography and videography editing of all kinds. But if you go out and buy something that designates it was made for photography or videography editing, you're going to pay a premium. because the moment someone slaps for photography and videography on it, they're going to charge more than needs be, I guarantee it. So my advice is, if you've been looking at a monitor like this or any other computer or hardware, but you've been hesitating because it designated for gamers and not photographers, if it's for gamers, it'll likely work just fine and save you some money. Just make sure if it's a monitor that it has good color fidelity. Now, while I'm very happy with this Samsung Neo G8 Odyssey, that's a mouthful, mini LED monitor, with its nearly 1200 mini LEDs and illumination zones in 1,000,000:1 contrast, and its 95% display P3 color, what is important is I think that this technology in general is great for astrophotographers. Mini LEDs give us wide color gamuts and faithful reproduction of color, and in particular, beautiful space that formerly only OLED monitors could do. As with all new technology, when mini LED monitors first came out, they were quite expensive. When the Samsung G8 micro LED monitor came out, I seem to recall it running around $1899 USD, and it still often retails at about, I think, $1,200 to $1,400 USD. So when I saw it on sale at $9.99 Canadian just recently, I jumped at it, did not hesitate. But regardless of sales, what these price changes tell me is that mini LED technology is finally coming into a price range where many of us will be able to take advantage of it. It's still a more expensive monitor, but on the affordable side of expensive, I guess what you would call the prosumer bracket. So, for astrophotographers, I think this is the way to go. This is the end of the image train that's going to give you superb quality and justify all that cost that you may have poured into your camera, your telescope, and your mounts and your filters. Make no mistake, without a good monitor, all that other technology you invested in is bottlenecked. And mini LED monitors have the potential to break through that bottleneck, bringing your images to life like you've never seen before, and really bring out the most in all your other astrophotography investments and efforts. So, if you ever thought my images should look better, they should look as good as prints, or you've been thinking about getting a new monitor, I really advise give a thought to mini LED monitors. They're the next best thing to OLEDs without all the problems. I hope this video helps you to make more informed choices regarding monitor purchases in the future. Thank you for watching. Now, get out there and shoot the sky.